Welcome back to the Lancer Lounge. This week I am joined by Mr. Jebin Yohanan, who was voted last week as Colleague of the Week by his colleagues. Welcome into the Lancer Lounge, Mr. Yohanan.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the invitation, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you. Just for our viewers knowing, this is our second take. There was a technical problem, so we're going through this again. We'll let you behind the magic, so this way you know what's going on. Mr. Yohanan, how did it feel being nominated and voted on last week as the Colleague of the Week?
It was a really, really heartwarming experience. Just to know that my colleagues have been appreciative of the work I've been doing, and to know that it's actually been helpful, was really encouraging.
As I said before, I appreciate your work as well, because you and I have had several conversations privately through Microsoft Teams, and we've worked out some problems together. So I know that your colleagues, what they're saying is true. You're always willing to help. You always have a positive demeanor, and it's always about the work. So I appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for your support, Mr. Sherman.
Absolutely. So how has it been for you during this time of quarantine?
Yeah, during this time, I honestly have to say that I've been okay. I'm in a very privileged position to be able to say that I'm well. I've been healthy. I've been fed. Eating is very important to me. So, the grocery lines have not affected me too badly. I've gotten the food that I need. I've been able to spend a lot of quality time with my wife, lots of board games, which has been a lot of fun. But I've also had the peace of mind of knowing that my immediate family in their different locations have also been well. But with that said, I'm very aware of the negative effects of this pandemic. There's been a lot of people in my circle that have been affected. A lot of people in our LHS community have been affected, and countless people in the world. And it's been heartbreaking. And as many of us are, I've been praying for all the devastation caused by COVID-19 to come to an end as soon as possible. And my hope is that when we do come out of it, and when we go back to, life as it was, back to our school buildings and everything else, that we as people will be better prepared to, live our lives better and serve our communities better.
Absolutely. Just as a side note, so in your house, you're the one who does the food shopping?
Yeah, well, typically we take rolls, but I live in Queens, and it's been pretty bad in Queens, so they have a suggestion of only one person from a household going to get groceries. So I typically do that usually Thursday evenings and, stay outside of the line. But it hasn't been, too much of a struggle to get it. Our grocery store still has most of the shelves stocked up enough to get what I need. And I've been blessed in that sense.
Right. I do it here just because, I've been out of the house, so I try to keep my wife, home, and protected with the kids. But I got to tell you, I waited one time an hour just to get in the store because they're restricting the amount of people that they're allowing in at a time. It didn't even take me that long to food shop inside, but because of, the restrictions, I had to wait outside for an hour to get in. So that was an interesting, time to go.
There was one time I think I had to wait at most, it was 30 minutes. And that time was definitely more than I spent in the store. But these last couple of weeks have been better over here. I don't know how it's been for you.
It's getting better. People are starting to, I think people are appreciating the restrictions more.
Yes.
And understanding it, where people at first were more frustrated and I think scared of it. I think now it's becoming, sadly, the new norm. So individuals are expecting it, and so you go with it with a grain of salt, as they say. Yeah. Absolutely. So what's been the hardest adjustment for you during this time?
There's been some adjustments that I find difficult. Some of the things that are normal for everyone, like going outside wearing a mask. I'm someone who has glasses, and so when I wear that mask and I have to cover both my mouth and my nose, it gets, number one, really hot inside the mask. But then as I'm breathing, that air moves up into my glasses and it's really foggy. So I can't really walk around and see well. So that's been an adjustment. And then even little things like washing your hands for 20 seconds. I typically wash my hands for at most 5 seconds, so being able to have the discipline of doing it for 20 seconds has been a difficult adjustment, but something that I intend to continue doing after we're past this pandemic. But just like for everyone, I would imagine for them as well as for me, the hardest adjustment has been not being able to see the people that I care about in person, not having much of a social life, like being able to go to the places that I care about, like our school building or my church. But I am really grateful that we live in a time where we have these platforms like Zoom or YouTube or Teams, where a lot of these important social staples in our life have not been completely removed during such a time like this.
Absolutely. And I definitely agree with the whole glasses part. You know, I typically wear my contacts to work, but I wear glasses when I'm home and on the weekends. Lately, I have not been doing it because I can't stand that whole fogging and that mask. And I do agree, it gets very hot. I don't know how they do it in hospitals all day. I give them a lot of credit for it for this time, and specifically now during this time. And with washing hands, don't forget to sing happy birthday. It will definitely keep you, there for 20 seconds. My 5-year-old does it all day long. It's someone's birthday 4 times, 5 times a day in my house.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny and entertaining. So,
my wife and I, in the beginning of quarantine, we made this song that goes, "To be healthy and sustain it, wash your hands." And then you repeat that a couple times. And then the last line is, "To be healthy and sustain it, and to know you can maintain it, to be healthy and sustain it, wash your hands." So, I sing that little jingle in my head and it works great.
Yeah, the little things like that always do. So how is the day in the life of a teacher now different than the day in the life of a teacher before quarantine?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm not sure if it would be the same answer for all teachers, but for a general education teacher like myself, a regular day in the school building has a lot of opportunities for large group interactions with my students. Most of my classes have 30 students in them. And so in the building, there's not as many opportunities for small group interactions or one-on-one interactions with these students. But quarantine has been really unique in that has kind of flipped. A typical day now, I might do a virtual lesson on one of those platforms, which is a lot more of a large group setting. But outside of that, most of my workday is spent interacting with students through email or text or phone calls or video chat. And that's going to be a one-on-one or at most a small group interaction. And it's ways that I can address the students' learning needs. And it's also been a way to connect with parents and collaborate with colleagues. And it's very interesting because obviously we're physically really distant right now. But I've gotten to know a lot of my students and a lot of my colleagues and a lot of families better during this time of quarantine than I had earlier when we were in the building.
Absolutely. The other difference also is in the building, you have a bell that, dictates, how you have to move and,
Right.
You got to go from one class to the next. Now you have more flexibility in your time and your, time that you have with students to speak with them or colleagues. So those relationships definitely are, growing, and they are strengthening as a result of that. What is one thing you've learned about yourself professionally during this time?
Yeah, I've learned that as an individual, I am the type of person who's not satisfied unless I know that I've learned every single thing I can. I keep on trying to figure out ways to get better if I know that there's improvements out there. I've always been a solutions-oriented type of person, and the world of distance teaching, distance learning came at us really, really unexpectedly. And my goal was to try to help my students learn as successfully at home as they might in the classroom. Obviously, that's a really big goal. So from day one, I started using the platforms I'm already familiar with, like Castle Learning and PowerPoint and Clever, and assign lessons and assignments that way. And that had some success, but early on, I was able to see and had a lot of interaction with my students that they weren't able to access the work. And so I challenged myself to try and learn more technological platforms to improve this virtual learning experience. So I started using YouTube and Zoom and Microsoft Teams. And through that, I was able to create virtual lessons that were more engaging, but also that were better differentiated for my students. For example, my ELL students, my English language learners, typically in the classroom, I translate all the written work. But during quarantine, I've also been able to use this tool on Microsoft PowerPoint that translates my English spoken word and transcribes it into Spanish subtitles on the screen. So everything that I'm saying if they don't understand the language, they can read it in Spanish. And from the little Spanish I do know, it seems pretty accurate. So yeah, that's been great. And I've also learned through a lot of collaboration with, folks like yourself and my other colleagues on how to streamline my work onto one platform to kind of make it a one shop for all website. And I use my teacher page for that, where I can embed my video lessons and my assignments onto that page so students can get all the work in one spot. And that's allowed for more students to complete the work. So I'm hoping to continue to improve as this quarantine continues.
Absolutely. What's something that you used to take for granted before quarantine that, moving forward, you're going to appreciate so much more?
My answer to that would definitely be technology. I always took it for granted, and I think I'll be way more appreciative of it moving forward. Typically, I'm the guy who, when it comes to any new tech, I am very late to the party with those trends. In fact, when I first started teaching 7 years back, I was in East Brooklyn teaching middle school students. And I was shocked to see that the vast majority of them had smartphones. And at the time, I was still rocking a dumb phone. I think it was a flip phone. And they would constantly poke fun at me for using it. To the point that when I finally got a smartphone, it was this big deal. However, I have to acknowledge that during this time, everything I've been able to do for my students, all the ways I've been able to collaborate with my colleagues is only possible because of technology. And I do believe these skills are extremely transferable to the physical classroom. And I very much intend to continue using a lot of the skills that I've been learning during this time.
So you speak about technology, and I see over your shoulder you have a record on your shelf over there. Yep. Is that a real record, or is that a sentimental piece of hanging there?
That's a great question. That was actually from my wife's bridal shower. We both love music. We both play instruments. So they had everyone sign on to these, sign in and write a nice message on the actual record. So they are real records, but they're really old ones that they felt comfortable using it that way. But with that being said, I don't know if you can see it, but we do have a record player in the room right there next to the cello.
Yep.
And I bought a ton of records after we got married, and we do listen to music that way as well.
Nothing like a vinyl. It sounds, the best that way with the needle going across it. Very nice.
Right.
So since we're just talking about a little bit of music history, how do you think, the history books, the science books are going to look back on this time? 10 years from now, 20 years from now, how do you think that's going to be written in history?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that history even now has a lot of moments that remind us of how powerless human beings actually are. And there are moments like this that bring us to prayer and reminds us of how important it is to be unified despite our differences. And I know that our country right now is very divided, and it doesn't seem like COVID-19 is unifying us very much, but I can only hope that once we're past this pandemic and we look back at this time in history, that as a country and even as a world, it was one of the things that made us unify much more than we had prior to it. But in terms of maybe what advances might have came out of this moment, I think history might look back on this moment and see it as the launch of the Second Enlightenment, or maybe you can call it the age of on-demand remote everything. There's this saying that necessity is the mother of invention. And I think that's true. But I would also add that necessity breeds innovation. The reason I say that is all the technology that's been used during this time of quarantine has been technology that was already invented, right? It was already there. But on a large scale, prior to this time in history, doctors were really hesitant to use technology to do a virtual appointment. Businesses were pretty reluctant to use technology to meet with clients virtually, and educators were reluctant to use it to teach virtually. But now we've been very innovative because of the necessity of the moment. And because of that, all those things I mentioned and much more are happening everywhere. And I think that when we make it past this pandemic, we'll see all of those things regularly happening, except it'll be with the privilege of people taking advantage of those things out of its convenience instead of out of necessity. And that's going to be great for society, I think.
Couldn't agree more. I'm just curious, like you said, you put a name to it. I wonder what they're going to call this. The industrial revolution, the technology revolution, the on-demand. I like that. That was pretty clever. You should copyright that phrase now,
right.
And see what happens. What's some advice that you would like to give to our viewers, whether it be your colleagues or some students? What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I think this has been a time that is obviously very, very stressful. And it's important to remember that it's hitting everyone differently. But some things that are common for all of us is that we're all in the midst of quarantine. All of us have lost our semblance of a social life. And while some of us may have gotten hit worse with potentially losing a job or, losing even loved ones, what can bring us all together is joining and doing, our small part in bringing goodness and positivity into all of our circles. I think right now is a unique time where we have a lot of opportunities for that and where we desperately need that. And it might look different for all of us. I think for students and professional workers like ourselves, I think we can try our best to bring our 100% effort to our work. And we can use the unique opportunity of being at home to discover new possibilities. There's a lot of things I learned through quarantine that I don't think would have happened if we were still in the building. And it might also look like, bringing hope and encouragement and a positive presence when you're talking to your friends or other people in your circle during virtual calls, or even in our assemblies, being a positive presence in that room. It could look like using this time to connect with people you haven't had the time to before, or, showing acts of kindness by burying old hatchets. And it could look like, instead of keeping your door shut at home, actually bonding with your family and your people that you live with. I know that it's been a really great time for me to connect with my wife and play board games. And, if we have the resources for it, it could also look like volunteering and helping combat this virus. There's so many options, but whatever it looks like, I really believe we can all come together and bring positivity and goodness to this world with all these opportunities. And I do think that makes a difference when it comes to defeating the virus, but also, living our life the way it was intended to be lived.
Well said. Absolutely. Finally, I know from watching your YouTube videos that you are a sports fan. You typically wear, a jersey of some kind, whenever you can to make a connection. In your, YouTube channel, your living room, living environment in the living room. Again, clever name. You're very good at these names. So my question is, are you watching the ESPN documentary, The Last Dance, on Michael Jordan?
Yeah, I've been following that documentary very closely. I'm a huge Michael Jordan fan. My sports heroes, I would say, are Michael Jordan and actually Allen Iverson. And I haven't, become a fan of anyone quite to that extent, although right now I'm a big fan of Russell Westbrook. But it's been really great to be able to look forward to that on Sundays in a world where right now there's not a lot of sports going on, or any sports, Nice.
Absolutely. I'm a bit, I grew up as a Knicks fan, so Michael Jordan broke my heart year after year after year. As we saw this past Sunday, in the Eastern Conference Finals, when they went up 2-0, and then he came back and became Michael Jordan, and 4 games in a row. But you got to respect him. You got to respect his competitiveness and his hard work. It's one thing when people think that it's just pure talent, but it's hard work that man put into his job every single day to be as good as he was. And I think that's what you do, behind the scenes. And I think that's why your colleagues wanted to recognize you last week on being the colleague of the week, all the hard work that you do and you put into your work. So again, I congratulate you. I thank you for spending some time with me this morning during the Lancer Lounge. I hope that you and your wife continue to be healthy and safe, and enjoy your time in this quarantine.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sherman. I wish you the same, and thank you so much for your support.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
Thank you. Take care.